the competitiveness of the South African market is just intense. Money. I think it's really important to also factor in the idea of how happy are you? How satisfied are you in your job? That whatever they're studying now is 99% going to have to change in the coming years. I firmly believe that there are certain young people that just don't work in the way that university works.
Hello everyone and welcome to the very first episode of It's Not That Deep, the show where we talk about life, pressure, expectations and everything in between. Today we are sitting with the lovely Miss Bond. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So Miss Bond, before we kick things off, why don't you tell our viewers something about yourself?
So my name is Robin Bond. I'm the careers counsellor here at Red Hill, and that certainly wasn't my destiny, I think, when I left school.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit about that probably later on in the session, but I'm a mother, and I joined Red Hill at the beginning of last year.
All right. So in your teenage years, can you maybe give us a little bit of insight on what type of person were you, your hobbies, your likes, your dislikes?
So I would say I was a pretty average teenager. My studies were always quite important to me. I didn't really want to do badly. But I also feel like I had no self-awareness whatsoever. I really didn't know what direction I was going to be heading in. I was really into swimming at high school. I loved reading, I loved shopping, and just spending time with my friends as well. Those were all things that I kind of did as things that I were interested in. But school was quite important to me in the sense of trying to keep my marks up. Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned the fact that you didn't really have that direct plan into what you wanted to do. So how did you end up becoming a career counselor and teacher?
So that was an accident, absolutely, to be honest. So when I was at school, there was no such thing as career counseling. There was no guidance. I honestly had no idea what I wanted to be one day. I feel like I went through high school for the most part, just getting through the subjects, not really kind of knowing exactly where I was going to end up. I didn't even really sort of have an idea or a set idea on the job that I wanted to go into one day. So as I said before, I was doing academically quite well, so my parents felt that university would be a good idea, but neither of my parents had gone to university. So it really was quite a new thing for all of us. So they did take me for some career testing, and there were a few things that had flagged up, and I sort of resonated with a few of them. So I ended up going to university and doing a Bachelor of Arts and a general Bachelor of Arts, and I picked a whole lot of subjects that I thought I would enjoy. And so even at that point, I wasn't even really specializing in one direction. One of the subjects I did take was psychology, and that was something I excelled at and I really fell in love with. And I remember going through, first year through to third year, it was probably always my top subject. So I knew that the road was going to be quite long to become a fully fledged psychologist. So at the end of third year, I was faced with the dilemma of, do I stay on and do another minimum of 3 years in order to become a psychologist, or do I leave and see if I can get a job? So I'd actually reached the point of pretty much I'd had enough of studying, and even though I got in to do my honours, and this is probably one of my biggest regrets actually in terms of careers, I actually decided not to pursue and go all the way to master's level in psychology, but to rather, I did I kind of changed direction. I went in and did my postgraduate certificate in education and teaching. That was only going to take me a year because I just wanted to go and travel. I wanted to go and work and see the world. And I think going straight from high school into university, I felt like I'd done so much studying back to back that, so I finished the PGCE. So ending up in education was actually not really a plan. It was kind of a default, I think. And when I finished the PGCE, I ended up finished it by January. I was in the UK and I'd already started teaching. And then while I was in the UK, it was actually a company that I started working for that just because I'd been involved in education, I actually started moving into the career counselling sector in 3 different schools within the area that I lived. And they trained me, and I did a lot of courses through the company. And that was really how I ended up doing career counselling. So it definitely wasn't a smooth, straight, sort of planned route. It was very much kind of the opportunities that presented themselves kind of took me to where I am today.
It's a great story. So if you had done your master's, how do you think your career path would have changed?
I definitely don't think I would have potentially been involved in education. I might have been focused in a different area of psychology, and I probably wouldn't be as focused on careers as I am now. It possibly would have been much more general mental well-being, and which are 2 things I would actually be quite sad to not have in my life right now, to be honest.
So, considering your profound knowledge of the different fields there are out there in the world, do you ever see yourself maybe restudying again and, branching into a different career?
I think if I was to restudy, I would definitely go back and finish psychology. But I'm actually at a point in my life where I'm really loving the work that I get to do. I really love the school. I love the students. And because it is an international school, every day I'm learning new things about the international universities that are out there. So I feel like I'm learning every day and taking on new challenges, upskilling, developing every day. So maybe one day I'll go back and do it, but for the time being, I must say I'm quite content.
Okay, so when you were back in school, did you ever feel quite stressed about, what career did you want to do, or did you just kind of have the mentality of, I'll just kind of go where the wind takes me?
No, I think it definitely is quite a stressful thing. And I see it even now with the students that I work with, that I think society and school, teachers, parents do put a lot of pressure on young people to make those decisions very early. So when we're choosing subjects in grade 8 and 9, it's almost like if you don't get those subjects correct, you've kind of messed up your entire career path. And I think that is a message that gets sent. It was sent to me, and I definitely think it's still very true today. And now, as I've got older and I've seen the different ways that you can go about doing different careers, there really isn't just one set path. But I only learned that when I got older. It wasn't something I knew at school. So I really thought that I needed to have it all figured out. And if I hadn't taken the right subjects, it was going to derail the plans for after school. And that was going to have a huge implication on my future. So I do think there's an immense amount of pressure on most school students to get it right from the start.
Yeah. So it's a great thing that you mentioned that, because it is a very stressful time. And I think a lot of people feel like they're falling behind. So what's something that you would tell them, for those who are feeling stressed and have that sense of, I don't know where I'm going, and they kind of feel that rush to kind of make the right decision?
So now, as I said, as I've got older and in hindsight, I can see the expectations and the pressure. But I don't really think with careers there ever is a timeline of you've got to rush to the finish line and then you've made it. I do really think that it's a natural progression through the rest of your life. And for all of us, our careers are lifelong learning. You've never reached the point where you can say, I can't learn anymore. So I definitely think that young people need to realize that some students will know from the get-go, I want to do this career and I'm going to follow these exact, paths. And maybe they get there very quickly and maybe everything goes to plan. However, there are students that are going to take a more indirect approach. Maybe they didn't take the right subjects. Maybe they've got to do a bridging course. Maybe they've got to do a foundation degree before they can get into a degree. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I honestly feel that everything in our lives is teaching us something. So even if you have to do extra steps and your kind of path isn't exactly the same as the person sitting next to you, I don't think that's an unsuccessful student. I think everything that you've done up until that point is still worthwhile and you've actually learned something out of it.
So you mentioned indirect paths, and I think one of the major kind of crossroads people face after they get their high school diploma is that, should I go straight into university or should I take a gap year? And that gap year, at least from my perspective, it has quite a bad connotation around it, in the sense that, you could be wasting your time and whatnot. So from a career counselor perspective, how useful, in fact, is that gap year?
So when I hear from a student that they want to take a gap year, there's two main things that I always highlight to them. So the first thing I always say is they really need to be quite honest with the type of person that they are, and they need to have a very disciplined personality in order to take an entire year out of studying, because the human body and the human brain gets out of that mode of studying very, very quickly. So we find it more difficult to do tests, to hand in tasks, assessments, etc., go to lectures. So I always say you really need to be quite self-aware of yourself and know that you're disciplined enough to actually go back into education after an entire year out. And the second point I always make is that a gap year has to be well-structured, planned, and meaningful. So it shouldn't be an excuse to just like Netflix and chill for a year. And the reason why that is when it comes to applying for a job, employers are going to see that you have a gap between your education, potentially from finishing matric and entering into university. And this is something that they're going to ask you about. And you need to actually have some positive reasons as to what was the reason that you took a gap year. So I think gap years can be wonderful experiences. And for students that are very undecided and they don't want to rush into university, potentially taking the wrong course, maybe that's going to waste time and money, I think a gap year can be a really useful exercise, but they must know they're going to go back into studying, and it really needs to be planned and well executed.
So what do you think are the ideal ways to kind of make the most of that gap year?
So there's a number of different things that I find students tend to gravitate towards. Quite a few people will do like sort of mini internships or job shadowing experiences that are organized all throughout the year. And this is a way of getting sort of tasters into the different areas and different jobs that are out there, and the workplace as well. I do have students that might do a year of internship at a specific, so for instance, last year we had a student who actually went and did an internship at a school, a remedial school, and that kind of cemented that she does actually want to go into education, and now she's going to be starting in university. And some will travel, some will go and volunteer in different countries. Some might take short courses and do a number of different courses throughout the year. So as long as there's some kind of structure and you're getting something positive out of that gap year. But yeah, those tend to be the sort of most popular things that people tend to do.
So in the event of a successful gap year, and obviously students then are going to go back to university afterwards. So I have a bit of a question. So for that gap year, have you already applied to the university beforehand, or was this, or during the gap year period, is that when you start to build your portfolio on top of your academic history?
So you can do either. So sometimes students might apply to university and only at a much later stage decide, actually, I'm not going to do university straight away, I'm going to take a gap year. And then they can defer their place. So they will contact the university and they'll move it to the following year. And then the university will hold that place for them until the following January. Alternatively, you can apply during your gap year as well. So then it would be the exact same time scales as how you would apply in matric, except you'd be doing it the following year. So you could really do either.
Okay, so and a lot of these decisions, I would say, are influenced by a lot of people. There'd be parents, friends, family members, people that we see online, and people that we respect. How can we separate our own expectations versus the expectations, say, that our parents or relatives can expect from us?
So this is a very difficult one to navigate because often parents have expectations that they want their children to fulfill. And that can even start already still in school, where they want them to take subjects like physics and maths. But if a child can't do those subjects, or it's an extreme struggle for them, the school is going to recommend that they don't take those kind of subjects. So that kind of conversation is going to start happening already before they've even got to the point of looking at university. However, for me, I really think there needs to be quite open communication between the child and the parent. They really need to see where that child's strengths are lying. What do they want to go into? Where is their passions? Where are their strengths? And, as a parent, I think it's quite important to recognize that we want our children to be happy rather than just fulfilling what I want you to do. The other thing is, as I said, going through school, if you are taking subjects and you're struggling in them and you're not doing so well, there is going to come a point where you're going to look into university and you're going to see that the entry requirements for those subjects are above perhaps what you're actually meeting. And that's going to kind of almost dictate as to what can you do at university if you aren't getting those entry requirements. And you might find that then there's going to be a shift in focus and parents become a bit more understanding towards a child's actual real interests.
Yeah. I think also the expectations can be very taxing on students, and I can even speak from personal experience that as much as my own parents want the best for me, it's kind of, I'm also trying to navigate this thing myself, and that's at the end of the day that it's going to be my decision and it's my path. So, but then also at the same time, when maybe you reach that point and you look at those entry requirements and see that maybe that's just not the person I am, how that can be quite detrimental. So what advice would you give to students on how to kind of deal with that pain and, in a sense, feeling of failure?
So with every single child that I meet with, we will never just have one plan of action. So it will never be a case of go to this one university for this one course and we're putting all our eggs in that basket. So because of the competitive nature of university, particularly in South Africa, we have to make multiple plans of action. So we go from, best case scenario, and then we will have a number of different kind of options on the table. So this can go from getting into the most competitive university with pretty high grades and through to, I will generally recommend that all students apply to sort of at least 3 to 4 South African universities. So that's sort of my benchmark, is you're going to find at least between 3 to 5 local universities that you're happy to attend and that has the course that you're looking for. Each of those are going to have different entry requirements, ranging from very competitive through to far more manageable. So that's also a good way to kind of spread it out in the sense of, if you don't make the most competitive one, we've potentially got 4 other options that you're going to be able to potentially get into. At each university, we're also given between 2 to 3 choices. So I look at your grade 11 results, the final grade 11 results, and I really structure how you apply quite carefully. So at least one of your choices out of the 2 or the 3, depending on the university, has to meet your grade 11 results. They like non-negotiable. If we do that, then they hold a place for you and look at your final grades. So it's almost like a safety net of having lots of universities and lots of choices to kind of make sure that we get to the end of the year and nobody is feeling like I've got no options. I am a failure, as you said. And then we also have many private institutions in South Africa that we will also use, and they tend to have easier entry requirements. So they come with a price tag, so they are going to be more expensive than our traditional universities, but you can still go and do a Bachelor of Commerce if you have lower maths grades or even if you're doing maths literacy. So there's a place for everyone. So I wouldn't say that anyone is a failure. It's just everybody has their different paths to walk at the end of grade 12.
Yeah, I think that's very true, because a lot of times your plan A never ends up being fulfilled. But that can also be quite of a sad experience, because no one really wants to resort to their plan B because, well, it's a plan B. So what's a good mindset to have for students who can't really go in that plan A path?
I always try and say to students that you really need to be flexible. So I explain from grade 9 that that the competitiveness of the South African market is just intense. We have millions of young people every year who are going to try and get into the very few amount of universities that we have with minimal places for first years. So the competitiveness is extreme, and the universities will always take the top candidates. They're going to rank everybody that applies, and they're going to fill up their places from the top student down. So I really do emphasize from the get-go, from grade 9 through to grade 12, there needs to be an element of flexibility and adaptability. That you might, for instance, get offered your first choice, but it might not be at the university that you wanted to go to. Or you might get into the university that you wanted to go to, but you're only getting offered your second choice. So it really is kind of thinking about, where do I want to go, where I can study what I want to do, or is it that I want to go to the university that's my first choice? For me, I usually recommend that it's really should be where you can study, your number one choice. And this is difficult because a lot of students want to follow friends and they all want to go down to Cape Town, or they all want to be together and share a flat. And so it's hard. It's very difficult when kind of dreams are changed. But yeah, there does need to definitely be, if you're thinking about studying in South Africa, it really is a case of there has to be some flexibility, and you need to be aware of that in South Africa. The second thing is because our university system is based on marks, it's really coming down to your marks. So at the end of the day, if you know that you're working to your full ability and you're achieving exactly what you can achieve, the highest that you can achieve, then you know I've really got into the places where I could get into. But if you get those final results and you know you could have done better, then I think you need to be honest with yourself and also take what you've been offered.
Yeah. So the competitiveness of the South African university scene, do you think that does more harm than good, in the sense that, because like you said, it comes down to your marks at the end of the day, and I'm assuming then they don't really consider your extracurriculars that much. So do you think that is quite harmful, considering the fact that maybe if someone excels in, let's say, sports, right, and then maybe that's their way of getting in, if they aren't that academically well?
I think that the universities are missing some very good candidates by not looking at a student as a holistic child. And when we look at the international universities, they are far more interested in everything that a student has been doing, which I think definitely has a place. And for somebody who's been committing a lot of time, for instance, doing a sport, it would be quite nice for a university to consider the time and the effort that has been dedicated to actually getting to potentially a very high level in that sport. But I do understand where the universities are coming from, that at the end of the day, they are academic institutions. They need to know that the students are going to be finishing their degrees. They don't want first years that are going to start and drop out, for instance, after 6 months because it's too difficult. There's too much of a gap between matric and first year. So they are wanting the best of the best. So I do understand where they're coming from. Don't necessarily agree with it because I do think they are missing out on quite a few very capable students. But yeah, I think because there's just such a demand on university places, the universities can set whatever entry requirements they want. And at the moment, it's academic, unfortunately.
So you mentioned the best of the best kind of mentality that these universities have, and which gives rise to a problem in the sense that a lot of people tie their worth to their success, which can lead to a very bad path, especially if you don't reach those success goals that you set for yourself early on. So how can we separate our worth from our success?
I think it's a difficult one because I do think in South Africa we have a mentality of allocating our views of success and status to how much money a person makes. And for me personally, I don't really feel that should be the measure of how successful a person is if you've got tons of money. I think it's really important to also factor in the idea of how happy are you? How satisfied are you in your job? Is it feeding into the passions and the things that you actually enjoy in life? Is it giving you maybe the time with your family that you want? So I think it's a very long time to be doing a job that to only be chasing the money, I think is going to make you very, very miserable. Obviously, money is important, but for me, I don't think it should be everything. So for me, I would want you to pursue something where you're actually happy and it brings you job satisfaction and you actually enjoy going to work every day as well. And obviously money is a factor, but it shouldn't be the only factor.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the myths about the career world, that money is like the only thing that can bring you happiness. So what are some of the other career myths that we might not know about?
I think one of the biggest ones for me is kind of what we've touched on earlier, is that young people need to have it figured out from the get-go, and that you're going to go and study, and whatever you study is what you're going to get into a job, and you're going to stay in that job for the rest of your life until you retire, and that's how it's going to go. So statistically, your generation is going to change their jobs every 2 to 3 years. So there's no such thing as like getting into, I think, a company and working there until retirement. There is so many more opportunities to reskill, to go back to education, to take extra courses. You might change direction. So, I mean, I went from being fully in teaching to into careers where, even though I was still in the educational field, I changed direction quite drastically. And this is going to be something that this generation is going to do often. So I really think the pressure we spoke about earlier of having it all figured out and making sure you don't make any wrong decisions that really is quite outdated nowadays. I think also one of the other things is what AI is doing to careers. So we all know about the traditional careers, and that's what many of our degrees are based around. However, we really need to also become aware of what AI is doing to the workplace and the labor market as well, and that certain jobs might become outdated, other jobs might kind of metamorphosize into something different. And I think that young people need to be aware of the changes and kind of be prepared with that flexibility and that adaptability, that whatever they're studying now is 99% going to have to change in the coming years. Change, adapt, you're going to have to learn new skills, you're going to have to kind of up your game. And all of us are going to have to do that as AI is changing the spectrum of the job force.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned that, really, because it is a big thing, this AI, because we don't know what it can become. And a lot of us, and I hopefully speak, I hope my generation can agree with me when you say that with the rise of AI, we kind of feel like that we need to pivot towards a more I work for myself type of model that we want to get into earlier. So becoming entrepreneurs so that AI doesn't necessarily take our jobs. So to what extent do you think the theory is that AI will be taking majority of jobs?
So this is probably one of the most common questions that I get asked, and it's a very difficult one for me to answer. Even when I visit universities and ask them about it, they are frantically trying to keep up with the development and how quickly AI is moving. So from today to tomorrow, I could already be saying outdated information in terms of AI. In terms of entrepreneurship, I definitely think that it probably would be a good field to be in. But saying that, I think that the mindset at the moment is very much of that soft skills. So things like empathy, compassion, communication are going to be very difficult for AI to replicate. So that's quite an important thing, that whatever you study, you really need to have developed those soft skills alongside it. So yes, ultimately, maybe a machine is going to be able to work out taxes for you, or they're going to be able to kind of do certain calculations, etc. So if it's coded correctly, it can possibly do that. So what they're finding is that those kind of soft skills that, are very human by nature, we're all going to have to really develop those quite carefully. So a lot of those jobs are actually at the moment looking quite promising, where you do have to have a certain level of humanity as well.
Yeah. So for those kind of jobs where maybe empathy doesn't play that great of a role, say maybe an accountant, how can they pivot their careers to kind of put them in the right position where they don't really feel threatened by AI?
I think all of us need to embrace AI, to be honest. I think when we first started hearing about AI, we were all very scared of it, and there was this idea of that it's going to take our jobs, and it's going to change life completely, and nobody's going to be able to work anymore. I really do think that we're getting to a stage now where we've realized that AI is not going to go away, but it really needs to be incorporated in everything that we do. So I think at the moment, for whatever profession you're in, you really need to kind of learn how to use AI, embrace it, and make it part of your work. I think instead of fighting against it, even universities have now started getting on board with teaching students how to use AI ethically. So instead of using it to plagiarize, using it to in ways that can complement the work that they're doing or make it slightly better, but without taking that information and just churning it straight out in as an essay. So everybody's kind of realizing we have to find a way to use AI in our work. So whatever profession it is, if it's accounting, if it's teaching, wherever it is, it's really finding ways to incorporate it, and I think doing as much upskilling and learning yourself of being kind of almost, I don't want to say ahead of the game because I think that's very difficult with AI, but knowing what's coming and anticipating for that.
So do you think that, considering the fact that we need to now learn how to live with AI and how to coincide with it, how do you think education now needs to shift? Because the connotation around AI is that it should be avoided completely. The shift is starting to, it's slowly coming along, but obviously there still needs to be more things to be done. So how do you think education should shift?
I think education is one of those industries that I feel doesn't like to change. So, the way that we've been learning in classrooms that way for so many years. So that like sitting at the table, listening to a teacher in front, boards, books, etc. So I really do think that the educational field is going to have to quickly learn how to catch up. I think the mindset of the actual teacher needs to be quite invested in AI to start off with, because if you're resisting it, you're going to resist it, allowing it with your students. So I think, first of all, we need to get that mind shift of kind of making the school and making the people that work there kind of buy into the fact that AI is here to stay. And I see this at university level, where you'll have lecturers who are really incorporating AI and AI resources into their lectures. They're teaching actually how to use the different forms of AI. And I think that needs to kind of filter down into school level as well. But we need the buy-in of everyone to do that. And I think teachers need to be educated first by professionals on how to use the different kind of platforms and ways to use AI, myself included. I'm in that batch as well. And I think then we need to be the next ones that are passing that skill on to our students.
And considering, like how I mentioned earlier, that with the rise of AI, it's kind of planted the seed in a lot of people's minds that they want to become entrepreneurs. And I think when a lot of people have that mindset, they kind of decide that maybe, okay, I won't go to university. So what do you kind of think of the idea that maybe university isn't for everyone?
So I'm always a little bit hesitant when somebody says to me, I just want to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to leave school and I'm going to make it big. Absolutely, there are examples of that happening. And I wouldn't say that every businessman that has a fantastic, thriving business has gone to university and has a degree and knows all about business. But I do think that even if you go to university and study like a general Bachelor of Commerce, I do really feel like that is a worthwhile thing to kind of have backing you up to go in as kind of an informed entrepreneur. Then you know how to work the various different areas of a business. In terms of university for everyone, absolutely not. I firmly believe that there are certain young people that just don't work in the way that university works. So university is very much like school, and it's very theoretical. It's lectures, it's taking notes, it's doing assessments, handing in tasks after you've really researched it. That is not working to everybody's strengths. Some people are going to be far more practical and would excel in a more practical course. So it might be actually rather going to a private college and learning a trade through that, or learning to go into the hospitality industry through that. And they will do far better in an environment like that. So I think we really have to look at the student as an individual, see where are their strengths lying, what are they interested in studying, and then see if university is the best fit. But it certainly, I don't think, is for everyone.
So as we come to a close, unfortunately, if you could tell someone, or actually yourself, what's one bit of advice that you would just tell your younger self about careers and what you want to do with your life?
So there's a few things that I harp on about, and you'll know because I've said them to you. I think if I had been a little bit more self-aware as to like what I was good at, what I enjoyed, just kind of a little bit more maybe introspective, I think I would have had a better idea by matric of the type of thing that I wanted to go into. So And I do think with subjects like life orientation and looking at careers earlier, that is something that we're starting to try and harness, is getting students to actually think, what do I like? What don't I like? What do I want in a job, etc. So that's the one thing. The second thing is using the internet as a source of research. So get on there, look at what's out there, know what are the universities out there, what degrees do they offer, what is that degree about, what do I need to get into that degree. So being well informed to make those decisions. And the last thing, which I think is the most amazing kind of exercise, is to go out and do as much job shadowing as possible. So even in industries that you think to yourself, I'm never going to go into that, just go and spend somebody watching them, because it might not be necessarily that specific job you end up doing, but you might pick up parts of that job that you really enjoy. So maybe the fact of like going out and meeting with clients, you actually really like that. Okay, you didn't want to talk about the stuff that they were talking about, but you like that part of it. Or maybe it's kind of designing stuff that you're going to pitch to clients. Maybe you enjoyed that. So even if you come away with elements that you actually enjoyed, I've never had a student come back and say that job shadowing was a complete waste of my time. So even if they came back and they said, I don't want to do that, I always think it's a win, because I'm like, well, you haven't gone and studied it for 3 or 4 years, spent all that money, only to now realize I don't want to do that as a job. So if you go into the workplace and you see already that that's something I'm not necessarily going to enjoy, I think there's still a success that's come out of that. So job shadowing, I say the sooner the better. Every holiday, go and spend some time with somebody watching them do their job.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. And for all my viewers out there, you heard it from the source herself. Just put yourself out there and you'll get it right eventually. So thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next episode of It's Not That Deep.